It had been a long and grueling campaign against chaos, and despite our overwhelming victory, our losses were quite bad. Almost a third of our total ground forces had been lost, and over half of our machines as well, half of them to enemy damage, the rest destroyed by our own troops after they succumbed to chaos corruption. And while the Air Force had proven extremely effective in providing close air support or deep tactical strikes, the losses had been even higher due to the inherent fragility of airborne machines. They will need shields, or else we simply threw away expensive forge time. I had a lot of work to next, even as the Black Lament travelled back home towards the machine forge. At my side, Primarch Ferrus Manus worked at his own cogitator station, trying to fix my imbalanced project of creating a new multi-laser type weapon, but instead of splitting the beam of a regular lascannon, I've tried splitting a Vulcan lance beam. You were too eager, Lord Lancefire. The concept is good, but your application. The genius Primarch said in a humble voice. I sighed in pain. You realize we still don't understand the real science behind the Vulcan lance. We are like children, matching bits of technology in new shapes, hoping something might work. But you will find a way, right? The angel in armor asked in a hopeful voice. I will. Once Trazyn gives me a new template. But this thing was rather classified. People had been burned alive for far less. Instead, I saved my project on a new dataslate, and opened the new shield model that I recovered in this crusade, so-called ionic flare fields, a combination of ion shields and flare shields that surrounded a machine in a powerful yet less energy-draining defense field. These ancient devices were also locked behind a barrier of knowledge, but could provide humanity with lightweight shield emitters that could be portable on light machines like sentinels and aircraft. Take a look at the new IF shield when you can, smart angel. I think even your regular dreadnoughts will be able to power these light shields, I said, and sent the new, damaged, STC template to my new work buddy. The angel tilted down his helmet at me for a moment, then checked his cogitator. Yes, very interesting device, this shield. I will make an effort while you sleep. Of course, the Spirit Primarch had no bodily needs, so he could keep fighting or working non-stop. Made for a perfect lab assistant, in my humble view. I just waved a hand in goodbye, and tesseracted away to my own bedroom, where the resident Fringe Inquisitor, Lady Amberley Vale, was already waiting for me in bed, and mostly naked, except some lingerie made of thin silk. My dear, you look absolutely appetizing, I admitted with hungry eyes. And? She asked in a coy voice. May I have the pleasure of your company, this night? I asked politely as I slipped in bed beside her. Her lips crushed mine in hunger. Well then, hunger had to be sated, right? An hour later, the fun ended and my regular fucking duty commenced, as fertile women began to arrive in my bed, to get impregnated and help save humanity with our next blank children. Only a dozen per night yet, but I would get stronger, I knew that. Once the Emperor had implanted my brain with some new special gland called Immortis, similar to the ones implanted in Primarchs, I have also recalled what my third build option was, the Ancestral Awakening. Thus, much like the Emperor and Sister Stern, I would keep getting stronger and stronger over time, in body, mind and soul. The Primarchs and the Space Marines also had this trait in their normal 40k method, as this other beings like Paternova Navigators or the Eldar Phoenix Lords. Glancing at Canis, who slept blissfully at the side of my bed, I mused inward at his future. The Emperor would have made sure I would have an immortal companion at my side, and one that would grow in strength as well. His ancestral ancestor would have to be Fenris himself, the wolf god of the space wolves. There were rumors of a giant wolf-shaped creature that hunted demons in the depths of the maelstrom. Good hunting in your dreams, my loyal puppy. With a tired body, I laid in bed and waited for blissful sleep. Darkness. Good morning, Lord Lancefire. A loud blood angel sergeant boomed in my ear, way too soon. The Tesseract view englobed near space, showing me the Blackstone Fortress and all the surrounding ships. A distant Eldar cruiser shadowed us, thinking themselves hidden by holoshields. My left index tapped on invisible cosmic strings, providing me with another Eldar cruiser and instead bringing out a thermos filled with black tea. A nice morning indeed. Ludvius rose his remaining eyebrow and scanned the bedroom for any intruder. Woof woo. Canis protested, as if anything could bypass his alert senses. Anything new? I asked in between sips of hot tea. Astropaths report we have left the Astronomicon range, with latest news before loss of contact of another tyrannid hive striking in Segmentum Pacificus. Adepta Tertius and Primarch Khan were en route to stop it. My old friend said in a milder voice. Big news then. The Emperor wouldn't send two big hitters unless there was a large danger. Khan himself could demolish a planet by himself. As for Janice, she was heavy backup for Khan. In case the crazy swordsman found something too big to slice away with the Tao. I see. Any special news? I asked in a low voice. 900 auxilia were found infected with various Chaos Source agents and given mercy. He added in a sharper tone. Amberly was working hard in her day job. The Inquisition had a hard job too. As expected. Fighting Chaos still created victims long after the firefight was over. The faster everyone was a blank the better. Your own chapter is phasing out firstborn Marines. I expect you will soon receive permanent reassignment as my bodyguard, I said in a level voice and threw a knowing glance at Ludvius. Couldn't say Sanguinius wasn't a realist. Once the cloned Marines were available, bigger, faster and stronger than the old Marines, even the Blood Angel himself was quick to discard the old version for the improved ones. The remaining old stock Blood Angels were given escort missions to various important dignitaries like rogue traders or admirals, or governors and generals, while the Cal clones filled the ranks with better Primaris Space Marines. Still better than being thrown in a last battle to wash away the shame of our weakness. Ludvius muttered in a sad voice. Or being dissected for spare parts. Mars would be glad to have Marine-grade servitors. I answered with a snort. It was still possible, if too many discarded Marines began to go traitor. Ludvius grit his teeth in silence. We have both seen far worse things in this hellish universe. The new Glory-class battle carriers are supposedly nice, he said in a confident voice at the new Primarch flagships. Ha! 5 new ships will not fix the galaxy, I laughed out, thinking of the magnificent creations praised all over the galaxy as the best creation of the Emperor of Man. Sure, they were twice as large as a Gloriana, and even had their own sub-fleet of fighters, bombers and escort corvettes, but for their cost the Imperium could have made 500 Nova-armed cruisers and punched a far greater enemy in the face. Much like I just did with 496 cruisers of my own. Breakfast, I demanded instead, and moved us both to the nearest mess hall. Brother Captain Semnai arrived at a fast walk to sit beside me at the table. Chapter Master, what about me and Chiron? He asked in a worried voice, while nodding towards Ludvius. What about you? I asked rhetorically. Orders have come through, from Segmentum Command. All Astartes' firstborn are to be dispatched as bodyguards. Semnai grunted in a hopeless voice. He seemed rather upset too. You realize how many children I have? As well as some inquisitors? Just pick one, I mumbled in between bites, while Ludvius just shook his head. Other chapters will be hit much harder, but the Lamenters had too many options. Semnai stopped to think for a minute, as I drank the last of my tea. You are rather cunning, my lord. I will pick Inquisitor Romaeus, he said in a happy voice. Duh, he picked the only Inquisitor I was actually married to. Go and study the new Inquisition protocols then. It's been a century since you were part of Deathwatch. I pointed out in a lighter tone, as I stood up and transported myself beside the dead angel. His armor just gestured at the hololith screen. Powering my 7 implants, I absorbed the data on the screen. The genius of the dead Primarch was undeniable. While I slept, he actually solved the ionic flare shield. Not the final, robust version, but a working one nonetheless. Tomorrow we reach Machine Forge, Primarch. Want to meet my Catan friend? I keep him locked in my basement. I asked in a soft voice. A giant wing patted my head in a paternal gesture. You have the strangest life in the galaxy, Lord Lancefire. He spoke with his modulated vox box. Coming from a dead spirit inhabiting a suit of golden armor, it sounded ever stranger. Just say hello, I spoke with a wry voice, as the Catan shard stared at my Primarch friend. He appears similar to those immaterium constructs you call a greater demon, Zorhulash said in a strange voice, both curious and weirded out. The Emperor has been living in the warp for the past 10,000 years. We can even detect his domain in the warp as the Astronomicon, even here in the real world. But in the warp, it's called the afterlife. I've seen it too, it is full of angels and seraphs and other such beings. I explained in a calm voice. And he has necrodermis plug ports too. The Catan added in a more enthusiastic tone. Perhaps you could plug something there? Those green swords? I asked with a smile. A phase blade? If he can power it with his soul, it would also become a fierce force weapon. Zorhulash mused to himself, then spat out a tooth and began to reshape it into a weapon hilt, even adding a golden aquila on the pommel. His time with the Ordo Xenos had served Zorhulash quite well. A few tests later, and Ferrus Manus gained a brand new phase sword, even better than those used by the Calidus Clade assassins. This was interesting, Lord Lancefire. But I must return to my duty. The Iron Hands need me. The Primarch spoke as farewell, then teleported out of the Pharos and rejoined his own chapter. Wait, I wanted to ask you so many things, but he probably would not answer. Beside helping me craft some wonderful STC templates, the angel didn't seem to want to disclose anything about the Emperor or the warp. Oh well. I wouldn't be easy bin him either. Dead yet floating about in angel form. I took out my sounding board and began searching the range of Pharos for new interesting things, such as Xeno invasions, chaos incursions, Necrons killing things, more pirates, even more Tyranids, orcs being orcs, and all the fun stuff of 40k. Searching for a new target, Pef Lancefire? The resident Catan asked in a friendly voice. Always. But hopefully less mindless killing and more loot. Maybe even an STC? I mused in a less hopeful voice. An entire galactic sector and I barely found a single STC, that containing my new ionic flare shield. And since my searches were backed up by the omnipresent senses of a tesseract, I could be sure I didn't miss anything. Damn STCs were indeed extremely rare, no matter what the law said. Ah, the fabled STCs you humans prize so much. You know there is a giant cache of them, right on board that Speranza Ark parked outside. The Catan provided in a helpful voice. I sobbed inward, and just nodded. The Speranza might have plenty of STCs under lock and key, but for now it only allowed us access to the most basic tech, albeit including standard Bane blades and even Warlord Titans. Like children given only the safest toys to play, on the other hand, seeing how many of the same toys were wielded by the Chaos worshippers, perhaps it made sense to keep the dangerous stuff away from easily corrupted humans. The Speranza is an over-controlling intelligence, with barely any human neurons. It wouldn't give us access to advanced tech, lest we use it on other humans. And humanity is rather at war with itself as well. I answered diplomatically. Ha! At least you realize what it is. Your tech priest friends are still bowing to its holy might 5 times a day, lighting incense candles and spraying holy oil. The Catan giggled in amusement. Still searching, I reached the Tau Empire and searched for some new tech, but it seemed they had also stalled. Even their demiurge allies had left them. Wait. The demiurge? They had advanced tech I was planning to steal, I mean trade. I muttered in dismay. The Catan leaned into his chains and stared at me. I thought the working theory was that the Tau had obtained an ancient STC cache and were building upon that. He quoted, from my own fake explanation I wrote for the Tau-sourced STCs. I was a fool. I mean a genius, but then a fool. I figured it out, then somehow fooled myself into thinking I fooled the rest. The demiurge were the STC source, I exclaimed in a groaning voice. You thought the entire Ordo Xenos and dozens of Forge worlds were all fools? The Catan asked me in an innocent voice. I slapped my face in silence. Of course my explanation was believable. It was the truth. I didn't fool anybody but myself. No wonder the Tau tech was quite easily translated into SDC format. I was merely working in reverse, much like I did for my entire life. Want me to trace their ships? Zorhulash asked in a mild voice. I sighed. Damn rogue trader build. Price? My shard, from that Necron overlord, he demanded in a gentle voice. I bought an Eldar goddess once. I can surely buy a simple shard, I said in a defeated voice. Damn it. Trading for a Catan might be too expensive. An hour later, I arrived at Solemnus in person, alongside my faithful wolf. The Necron citadel appeared even more powerful now, with hundreds of Necron war constructs guarding every hallway, while millions of Necrons stared at me with robotic eyes. It felt a bit creepy. A small scarab floated on my shoulder, speaking in Trazin's voice. You still can't have my titans, Peflansfire. Bah, foiled again. Take me to your leader, I demanded and poked the scarab beetle in the glowing eye. The space shifted and moved me and Canis into a different tomb glowing with strange blue lights. In the middle of the cavern, hundreds of Necron lords, cryptex and other higher ranks were elbows deep inside a dormant Catan. The Void Dragon himself. Busy day? I asked in a polite voice. A Necron robot body twitched as if caught by surprise. We don't get many visitors here, rogue trader. Trazin the Infinite said in a grand voice as he emerged from somewhere inside the sleeping Catan. I see you like my gift. I observed in a mild voice, with a nod at the priceless Catan. Come, let's talk somewhere else. He muttered in a low voice, as if ashamed of being heard. In a second, we moved again to his old rooms. Big project then? I saw different dynasties here. I offered as a starting point. Mostly those infected with the Flare virus. They hope to find a permanent cure here. Trazin explained with a robotic smirk. They would find only work and more work, as the crafty Necron would never give them a final cure. There is a shard of the potentate in the Pariah Nexus. I need it, for something, I said in a level voice, while a pair of dataslates appeared in my hands. The Multi-Lance Project and its bigger brother the Volcano Cannon split weapon. I had no hopes to bring them to a final product phase by myself, and even the Angel was powerless. Trazin took the slates and nodded slowly, while examining Canis with scientific eyes. You know, the wolf is. I know, the Emperor has worked hard to grant me a worthy companion. Canis has a lot more to grow before he can eat something like a void dragon, but someday, I said in a praising voice, and patted my wolf in encouragement. The mighty wolf turned and looked at me with intelligent eyes. Trazin stared for a minute longer at my wolf, considering something. The potentate is a coward. But he does have cosmic fire, like you said. Useless to me now, but still, he should be worth something. Fine. You can return the Tesseract Vault from Deimos, and we'll trade by true worth again. I warned him in an angry voice. He gained a free transcendent Catan from that deal, not to mention the vault itself. Wait. I know, you're far ahead since the last time. You can have a dozen Venatoria Titans, and these new toys. But, I do need a symbolic gift in return. My boss would not accept a loss for my dynasty. Trazin muttered in fake shame, as if his pharaoh would care about his sneaky deals with a humble human like myself. But fine. I did have something I wanted to be rid of. Eldar were no longer an approved target for Imperial forces anyways. With a smile, I transferred the sneaky Eldar cruiser that followed me, including the crew, except their personal weapons and armor. I had my own use for them, especially since my obsidian auguries often needed deniable kills for their job. A shuriken catapult sent a different message than a lasgun bolt in the head. You still owe me for the transcendent Catan, Lord Trazin. I will not ask anything now, since you're busy with harnessing the Void Dragon, but someday, I said as a parting gift, and waved goodbye as I was returned to the machine forge with a new tesseract containing an unbound Catan shard. A dozen upgraded Titans would beef up my Titan Legion again, recovering my losses in the Crusade, while the multi-laser style Volcano Lance and Cannon would upgrade my arsenal by an order of magnitude. Now, let's see where those demiurge went. Lord Lancefire. You are needed on the Black Lament. An urgent message stopped me from transporting to the Pharos. My lord, the Archmagos demands you visit her immediately. A second message arrived on the Mechonicus manifold circuit. My dear, make some time and meet your lonely wife, can you? A certain inquisitor whispered in my mind directly. Villain. Damn it. I wanted to explore the galaxy. Breathe, Pef. The Catan could wait. So I tapped my fingers 3 times, moving myself to the Blackstone fortress and bringing 2 anxious women in my presence at the same time. Esteemed fabricator, you look well-oiled? I offered in an uncertain tone. My wife pinched my side in reproach, so I possibly missed something. Quite possible. We need to schedule the forge's production cycle for the next decade, my lord. The fabricator answered with a polite tone, but seemingly rather urgent. So I took out the latest STC dataslate and gave it to her, knowing it would keep her busy for an hour, at least. Then I rose my eyes, watching the brave sanguinary priests lose their momentum and step back, as if I was a dangerous predator. What is it now, Brother Helios? I asked their chief priest. Well, we lost all the apothecaries sent on crusade, he murmured with a wary glance at my inquisitor wife. As I predicted, even before we departed. You have replacements, I would hope? I asked rhetorically. I knew I had ordered 400 new apothecaries to be trained and prepared, and even if there may be delays. Brother Helios nodded and pointed at the conference holoscreen, where the training schedule was just listed. We have 28 apothecaries ready to begin duty, Chapter Master. As for the rest, 42 are still in the last stages, and... The graph ended abruptly on the screen. 70 apothecaries, and the rest failures. Still a good ratio compared to regular chapters, but damn. 330 dead young boys? Only 2 of the old apothecaries remained from the initial ranks, now promoted as Lamentor's lawkeepers, since they were over 1,000 years old and rather knowledgeable. So we doubled the numbers of apothecaries? I said in a lighter voice, as if I could only see the full side of the glass. Brother Helios hesitated for a moment, then nodded. It would seem so, my lord. Anything else? I asked, curious. Well, there are 3,000 of your special tech Marines that have returned from their Forge World training. And we still have 1,255 surviving ones from the first batch. 4,355 total, plus the 3 Forge Masters. He explained in a softer voice, this time glancing at the fabricated tech priest. Again, we double their numbers, right? All is good? I asked with fake joy. The sanguinary priest changed the graph once more, this time pointing at the blank brothers, thus my own sons and grandsons. We took 81 casualties among the battle brothers, and the last implantation cycle has produced 305 viable recruits, as well as 5 more poisoning cases. The supernumerary recruits can be sent to our allied chapters. I hugged my wife and frowned at the numbers. Nowhere near close to 1 million blank Astartes I would need to replace the corruptible ones. Possibly 2 million now, with the extra founding of new chapters by fresh Primarch gene seed, that churned cloned Primaris Marines by the thousands every day. What do you say, dear wife? I asked with a nod towards the screen. The extra numbers were too small to make a difference anywhere. 2 companies of blank Astartes were too few. Vilaine clenched her hand over mine. I would say, 200 Culexus assassins would make a difference, even at galactic scale. Both the chief priest and the Magi Tech priest locked their gazes on the screen, then turned towards me with questions on their eyes. At my side, a Culexus assassin decloaked and coughed lightly. That would be a change. The temple training would only enhance their killing potential. Vadrax mused in a thoughtful voice. Like our own Alpha Legion. This has promise, my dear wife. I answered in a faraway voice, the savant implant already passing thousands of potential applications. It could work. Or fail and burn me to ash. What training would my boys get? Would they resent me for ruining their lives? You are skeptical. Don't trust the Calexis temple? Verlaine asked in a knowing voice. Ah, the wonders of an inquisitor's mind. As I said, like our own Alpha Legion. Do you even imagine what hundreds of demented killers could do in my name? I can already hear them. I am Lancefire. I grunted with a heavy sigh, aping the Alpha Legion motto, I am Alpharius. They all recited in their psychotic ways. They do say that a lot. Vadrax muttered at my side, before going invisible again. The Emperor protects. Perhaps we should defer the decision to him. Brother Helios proposed with a wary glance at the former spot where the dreaded Calexis was last seen. Come, Fabricator. We'll go over the last campaign and decide what we can discard or increase. I spoke towards my loyal archmagos. Over the next hour, we passed the less effective machines I have used in the Stygius Crusade, discarding most close attack planes and the light armored weasels, then renounced the Lehman Russ tanks completely. The Ragnaroks had fared twice as good if not more. Now the infantry, what to do? I hummed to myself. Your sniper rifles seem to have worked beyond expectations. I propose 400% increase. My fabricator offered in a mild voice. Finding 4 times more snipers would be hard, but fine. They may not be scout marines, but a heavy bolter to the face would still kill someone, I said in a level voice. Over 7% from all Chaos Marine kills were due to my snipers. If a small investment would increase this to 25%, would be awesome. The tarantula turrets, they become useless as soon as the front line moves. They will need to move with the front. She proposed with a glance at the resident omniscient emissary. Sure. I will give them wheels or something. Maybe legs, so they keep pace with the infantry. Small legs, but more of them, like spiders. Sigh, tarantulas were spiders. Chimera transports turned into fireballs as soon as they entered combat. The tech priest observed with clinical post-battle analysis skills. They are not tanks, and the light tanks fared even worse. Perhaps a new transport vehicle, based on the Ragnarok chassis. I offered with a sad headshake. Then again, one shouldn't use mechanized infantry as tanks anyways. Something to fix in the academy training. You would know better where to find such a holy template, Lord Lancefire. Perhaps the new shields can also help. They would sure help the poor sentinels. She added in a wry tone. The sentinels worked great. 400% increase per regiment as well. A full division could field 40,000 armored walkers, and the if shields would make them battle-worthy. Nothing else except an adamantium shell would provide proper defense against tank-level weapons, I said with a shrug. I quite loved my new armed sentinels, firing their las cannons in deadly volleys. Not only they provided heavy weapon support, but they also carried their pilot in relative safety. Not quite power armor, but close enough. More was better here. The Tau did quite fine with their fire cast as well. The fabricator shrugged as well, then shook a mechadendrite at me. You know adamantium is quite hard to shape. And too heavy for sentinels anyways. I know. A single frontal plate will help though. If you remove the plasteel, it would only increase by 18% in mass. The mass distribution would be off, the balance actuators would overheat, the engine would. The tech priest argued in a more logical tone. Okay, fine. Heavy metal, I get it. I waved a hand off. Shields then. Perhaps a small plasma engine instead of the Promethium VX. Not critical at this time. Agreed, my lord. The Doomhammer variants have proven to lack engagement range. We shift to the Volcano Lance template? She asked with a curious tone. Ah, my favorite tanks. Baneblades with twin giant melter guns. They would melt anything that got close, even titans. But Chaos Titans had volcano cannons, they did not need to come close. As for mounting volcano cannons directly on the Baneblade chassis, I knew how poorly the Shadowsword variants fared. Not only they lacked a turret, but they also had to stop and charge their capacitors for a minute before firing. Made them slow and vulnerable, not that the enemy would stand still and allow them to snipe. What to do? Wait for now. We don't arm the new Baneblades yet. There is a new template in the works. A pulsing volcano cannon, like a multi-laser. And we keep the remaining Doomhammers. Tyranids do try to come close. I explained with a grin. A long metal tentacle extended and patted my head, then descended to grip my smaller lance. You somehow managed to make my engine hot, Lord Lancefire. And I am well oiled now. She purred with a mechanical voice. Oh well. I did have a strange life, in this brave new world. After spilling my gene seed into Lady Gemma's Vitae womb, I finally got a spare moment to hide away and tesseract into the Pharos, joined by a giant wolf named Canis. My Catan friend seemed to be rather anxious for my return, eyeing my third tesseract gem with greed. You got him? You doubted me? My heart is bleeding. I quipped with a relaxed voice, while tapping the Lamentor sigil on my armor. Release him already. The ancient creature demanded, shaking his chains. And when he instantly attacks me, I will be forced to kill him, my precious trade ruined. You don't want to know what the devious Necron Lord forced me pay, I said in a calm voice. I watched you trade with the Necron before, Pef Lancefire. I also know what happens to your enemies. I even helped at Camorra, didn't I? Zorhulash pleaded in a more quiet voice. Well, then. Let's see if a century of indoctrination really worked on the Catan. With a flick of my fingers, I brought out the spare shard, while my other hand held a Necron transdimensional beamer, just in case I was wrong. A giant statue-shaped being emerged beside Zorhulash and tugged gently at his chains. You can't leave unless we remove the heart, brother. The second Catan spoke in a sad voice. You have a chosen name, Shard? I asked, curious. The being glanced at my green glowing beamer, then froze as Canis growled in a low tone. So, it is true. We are in deadly danger around you, Pef Lancefire. The Catan Shard observed in a cautious voice. It seems Trazyn was right, the potentate was indeed a coward. Very well. Your name will be Lash. Like a smaller brother to Zorhulash. I added in a careless voice, then stored away the useless beamer. If I had to use it now, I had already lost. You seem to have designs for my future, human. Nobody names something unless they do. Lash observed with a smart inference. Then again. Catan. For now, you will produce phase blades for my children. But to travel the galaxy at my side, you will need a disguise. I muttered in deep thought. There were too many tech priests and Ordo Xenos inquisitors around, and they have practiced detecting Xenos. The wolf will make a good shape to take, little brother. And if you need to fight, Canis is actually rather formidable already, even before you upgrade his weapons and shield. Zorhulash proposed from his wall. This isn't the freedom I was promised. Lash grunted while kneeling beside Canis to begin upgrading his shield collar and retractable claws. Patience, Lash. The rogue trader is right. We need to acquire the rest of our shards, and the galaxy is filled with humans, Uldari and others. I will provide Overwatch support with the Pharos. Zorhulash spoke in a more confident voice while nodding towards me. Stepping back, Lash shapeshifted into a Fenrisian wolf, almost identical to my Canis. There were subtle differences, or maybe I was too used with my wolf not to notice. Canis, point him out the markers which make him alien. You would know best how a wolf should feel. I added in a softer voice. Canis looked at me for a minute, perhaps testing if I was joking. Then he began circling the fake wolf, sniffing and clawing at wrong things, while growling softly. It took a long hour until Lash began to resemble a real wolf, even to my Tesseract's senses. Woof woo. Canis howled loudly, then poked the fake wolf to copy him. Woof woo. Lash tried, and got a giant paw slapping his head. Again. More work to do. So, you certainly had time to search for the demiurge, right? I asked with a tired voice. Most of them have gathered at Tenebrae_9 to 50, in the Octis system. The rest have returned to their origin place, in the galactic center. Zorhulash explained as he centered the Pharos view on the system. Millions of mining drones were busy exploiting the asteroid minerals, while 100 strangely shaped void ships held station near the sun. And inside the ships, short and bulky humans wearing different types of void armor and human-looking weapons or devices, if clearly more advanced. Perhaps more advanced than the Mechanicus had. Jackpot. These guys surely had their own STC, and perhaps not a single one, seeing what they have done to the Tau. Their tech looks human enough, perhaps Federation level. I muttered to myself, as the Pharos gently shifted the viewpoint to show me the inside of their engines. Warp engines, but small and advanced ones. And the Geller fields looked even stranger. Everything looked polished and clean, although the ships were clearly old, thousands of years old at least. Curious. If your Speranza would truly help, you could have the same toys. Zorhulash pointed out with a wry voice. Pushing my mind strongly, I space-dragged a small dagger hilt and brought it into my hand. A plasma blade lit up the inside of the Pharos, making the wolves fall silent. Pretty much the best tech of the Mechanicus, among some lost human miners in the middle of nowhere. Miners that have upgraded the Tau to a minor power in a couple of centuries. You have gotten stronger, Pef Lancefire. Before, you couldn't have ported a single coin from so far away, not unless you had someone there to provide you an emotional link. The Gatan said in a slightly surprised voice. Straining myself even harder, I began stealing more small items and brought them back. Pens and data slates, bolter rounds, even the glove of a void suit. My head began to swirl in a daze, and I decided to stop. I could steal everything once I entered that system in person, and without even a headache. Let's test your disguise, Lash. If you get your head blown off by the first Inquisitor, don't blame me, I demanded in a wry tone, then stored Canis away and moved onto the machine forge, where the new Titans were getting lots of oil and love from the resident tech priests. My lord, I hope you did not steal the god machines from Forge Venatoria. Although, I doubt they ever had anti-grav plates able to support a warlord Titan. A ranking Magi intercepted me, as I stared at the floating Titan being tested by Zeta, my darling princeps. Not stolen, but not quite legal either. It was a trade for a favor, to a certain person. I explained with a wink. I see, my lord. We will make haste to scrape the old markings then, and anoint the machines to our Deus Ex Machina Legion. The omniscious favor comes in many forms, after all. The Magi answered after he failed to wink back with his mechanical optics. Lash walked at my side in the wolf form, pretending to be a smart wolf. Nobody seemed to notice the difference, so everything was fine. Incoming, angry female. The Catan sent on my manifold circuit, proving the thing was very much not impregnable to malicious outsiders. Or at least those of Catan ability. I turned and hugged my princeps wife before she could start screaming. We can't give every Titan grav wings yet, my love. This heretic managed to modify a dozen, before he was chased away. I saved the poor Titans, but the schematics will take time to recover. I explained in a low voice, as Day_Virgo slowly calmed down. You better make it happen, absent husband. My room, tonight, she demanded as she ran away to climb into another floating Titan. Marriage saved, again. Now, who could save my life and help me give my wife floating Titans? I muttered to myself as I walked away, heading towards the noble knights in the next base. Lash threw a knowing look at the floating Titan and ran beside me. Making the grav plates would be difficult with your low-tech, human. And what are those horrific teeth swords on these walkers? The Catan asked in a repulsed voice, as we stared at a knight-sized chainsword hanging above us. Our version of a chain blade. You should hear the sounds they make, as the adamantium teeth bite into tank armor. I quipped in a joking tone. They sounded quite horrific, I admit. I rather not. Wolf ears are very sensitive. I could give them real blades. The Catan offered by himself. Well, I couldn't say no to a few hundreds of Imperial Knights wielding phase blades, could I? That Eldar cruiser I gave to Trizin was already paying off for itself. Those two men. Lash nosed at a pair of sacristans that tended to a damaged knight. I searched my implant, and brought up their files, both recruited on Boros when we rescued that night world. Heavily augmented with cybernetics, they were almost tech priests in their skill with fickle machines, and worth their mass in gold. They have just returned with us from Stygius. What about them? I asked, curious. Etheric disturbance. Type 3, contagious. The Catan Shard noted in a disgusted voice. I froze for a moment, even if the exact type of danger wasn't certain yet. You better translate that in Low Gothic, I said while sending a message to my wife, just in case. The wolf-shaped Tan drew a deep breath, and twitched his nose. Corrupted recently. Now trying to corrupt this walker and install an etheric nucleus inside its processing core. Engaging. He answered with a loud growl, then flashed at speed towards the infected sacristans. His claws extended out in mid-strike, flaring with green light for a second, before slicing the two intruders into a dozen distinct parts, all smelling foul of demonic corruption. Verlaine arrived at my side a moment later, with her bone staff already in hand. I see you have everything in hand, husband. She offered with a thin voice, tingling with unspoken danger. When the Emperor upgraded Canis, he installed a few new organs. I explained with a calm shrug, then gestured at the wolf Catan to keep searching. And even phase tech claws. I knew the wolf was special, but now? She murmured to herself, as my other wolf ran around, sniffing at the repair and logistics personnel. They taste foul, but I was rather hungry. This woman. The Catan continued as he stopped in front of Felicia Tiber, my concubine and priceless help with many STC repairs. What about Felicia? She was an orc prisoner once. I said with a tinge of pain in my heart. I hoped she wasn't corrupted, but then Naylor, anyone could fall. Even Primarchs had fallen. Orc? Yes, she still has the old one's smell on her. Etheric disturbance, type 1, localized. You appear to use that knowledge for yourself? The Catan asked me, sounding curious. Call this a double-agent plot. She can understand non-human machines. I explained with an inner frown. Isn't this woman your own concubine? Verlaine asked with a veiled suspicion. She smells of orc. But we knew that already. I answered her inquisitive voice. How interesting. I wonder if we could chop that nose and, never mind. The wolf's nose is his work as well. The Inquisitor faltered at my glare, realizing that maiming my wolf wouldn't end well. I could build you a dozen etheric detectors, rogue trader. For a small price. Lash offered with a tiny snort in my mind, knowing I already considered the option. You can continue purging the infected, Lash. But other than chaos or tyrannid corruption, you will ask for my approval. As for the price, make your offer carefully. There are thousands of other shards out there, some more pliant than others. You can ask your brother what I did to those that failed to comply. I replied with my own veiled threat. Then I turned to Verlaine and smiled grandly. My dear wife, although you parsed your request poorly, I understand. You may receive an olfactory etheric detector one day, when I manage to copy it. The Inquisitor measured me from head to toe, then glanced at the fake wolf that sped up to sniff at more and more forged personnel. She then leaned on her bone staff with a thoughtful look on her face. This smells like another of your outrageous trades, my dear. More Necron magic? She guessed at random with her Ordo Xenos honed senses. Necron? I doubt they have this thing exactly. Maybe similar though. I mused softly, mostly to myself. Trazin did have his Jokero task group, which already provided me with omnisense eyes and visors, but they were clearly not as effective. Smell detectors though, I may have lucked out again. More dubious tech that would make my work so unbelievably easy? Tell me more, dear husband, Velian demanded in a throaty voice, promising pleasure or pain, at her discretion. I vacillated for a second, then picked pleasure. We will discuss this in private, say later tonight? I offered with a coy voice, then walked away rapidly, already busy cleaning up the gory mess left behind by Lash. Sweep the infected corpses into the sun, then wave my all-cleaning Necron wand. I should choose another profession soon. Becoming the janitor of the galaxy was going to be tedious. I wasn't joking either. Cleaning the mess left behind by the Crusade took me a whole month, and gave the Catan shard thousands of souls to feed upon. Building the etheric scanning device wasn't as easy as I hoped either. We couldn't simply use Blackstone for everything, with humanity being as xenophobic as ever. Making it look like an elephant's trunk like Lash proposed, wouldn't work either. Biotech wasn't used much by the Imperium, except for certain internal augmetics. In the end, we picked a wristwatch lookalike, with a dozen thin needles poking the nerves under the skin and connecting the user with the device via bioelectric signals and neural feedback. It was painful to use, and even smelled a bit like the normal 40k cyberware, so it was perfectly fine. When I pointed mine at the real Canis, the detector screamed in my mind of a major Type 5 disturbance, if localized to a single individual. I was right, the Emperor did boost my puppy with his version of a Great Warp Angel, or maybe demon. Heavenly Wolf, I decided as Canis sniffed at me, then turned to stare at his competitor. Now you see what I see, when you look at your innocent puppy. Lash added from the side, then managed to raise a hind leg and scratch his head. You say he can also devour souls, like the Catan? I asked instead as I leaned into my wolf and scratched his chin. He needs time to grow and develop the animaphagen gland. Just like you do, Pef Lancefire. The Catan answered with a piercing gaze at my forehead. Whoa, he sprang the news on me mercilessly. Then again, I was the one to feed 2 Catan shards to the Emperor. Now that he got the taste, I doubted the Emperor would stop at 2. I looked to the wall, where Zorhulash still hanged impaled by living metal chains. I will depart for Octis soon, maybe tomorrow. You have some nice targets en route, mighty Zorhulash? The Catan nodded and made the hololith screen connected to his toe lit up. A number of worlds began to scroll, each with their own interesting loot or adventures. I linked to the sounding board and began scanning the galaxy and systems on the way with the Pharos, until I had a dozen points to create a route. As each target world demanded a different level of authority, I had to make sure to bring the appropriate ships and companions on this quest. Rogue traders had little power inside the Imperium, even those like me, with a signed warrant. An Inquisitor was required, as was an Astartes fleet and some Forge Tech priests, even a Forge ship. A dozen Indomitus ships from the Imperial Navy, then transport ships, supply, refueling. It was still a Crusade fleet anyways, not that the Black Lament Fortress was weaker than any Imperial fleet by itself. In total, 8 battleships, 4 battle barges, 122 heavy cruisers and 12 escort carriers would form my ranging fleet, those that have escaped from the Stygius Crusade with the least damage. The rest would need years or decades in dock, or be melted for metal and forged into new vessels. Barely a third of my grand fleet, but still powerful enough to contend with nearly everything this evil universe could throw at us. I started with a single light cruiser though, so I wasn't really unhappy. First target, another Blackstone fortress, the so-called 8th Blackstone Fortress. Once recovered and upgraded, it would nearly double my fleet's mass and firepower by itself.